Hello everybody, this is Victor, and today we're going to have kind of an impromptu video. I just made this in the fly today without meaning to, I wasn't originally planning to do a video this week, and I had nothing to talk about, and then I found something to talk about. So, at the risk of sounding like I'm beating a dead horse, and I mean a long dead horse, at the risk of sounding like I'm digging a horse out of his grave to beat him, we're going to talk about the ending to Mass Effect 3. And the only reason this is happening is because of a YouTube video I saw recently by SolePorpoise, you can see behind me. And just a little bit of context here, I've been really into cosmic horror lately. It's just a phase I'm going into right now where that's what I want to read. I'm writing a cosmic horror short story that I'm really getting into. And so I've been looking at a lot of stuff, a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, a lot of Junji Ito, and a lot of stuff like Bloodborne too. And that led me to a video series called Oh the Humanities that SolePorpoise does. I think it's a phenomenal series, and I watched the Bloodborne video. I was like, oh my god, this guy thinks about video games the way I think about video games. And so I wanted to see more of his stuff, and I see something about Mass Effect. And so, of course, one of my favorite game series of all time, I have to put it on. And he wants to defend Mass Effect 3's ending. And I watch it, and it's a great video. And I actually think there's a lot to say about what he said. But I still don't feel that Mass Effect 3's ending is worth defending, because there are so many issues with it. Of course, I don't really need to go into all the issues, but that's just the context. And the context is that this is more of me wanting to respond to some of the ideas he talks about, because there are some really good ideas in there, but there's also some ideas that I think fall under further examination. And maybe everybody disagree with me. I certainly did not sit there and think about this for an extended period of time to put a video together after researching everything, so this is very off the top of my head. So I would love any responses, any back and forth, any debate on this subject. And I don't know, maybe SolePorpoise might watch himself one day and can decide what he agrees or doesn't agree with. But I have a notebook here, so I'm going to be looking down a lot versus at the camera. I took notes watching his video because it just, again, a lot of great points he made and a lot of interesting ideas. And he discusses Mass Effect as being a biblical story, but also a story in the line of Nietzsche with the death of God. And so his viewpoint are that the Reapers are angelic beings, or, I mean, not literally, but, metaphors, angelic beings, and I'm dropping the top of my pen. And that the Star Child is basically the symbolism for God. And by, killing the angels, by trying to kill the Reapers, trying to kill God, that we would rid ourselves of an obsolete worldview, like Nietzsche discussed. Although Nietzsche also discussed the idea of individualism, which he says correlates with Mass Effect's heavy choice system, and he believes that a lot of the Mass Effect 3 story coincides with the Book of Revelations, and I think there's some really great stuff. He talks about the seven-headed beast being the 7 races that you have to visit the homeworlds of. The humans, Turians, Solarians, Krogan, Quarian, Geth, and Solarians. One of the heads of the beast, of course, is the Deadhead that is seen to revive, and he says that's the Krogan with the genophage, which I think is a really cool idea. The second beast that's supposed to inform people of the first beast, he says, is kind of like Shepard and Cerberus. Like the beast doesn't exist without for Shepard. The 7 races never unite, and those are the military races, of course. There are more races, but those are the military mites. Never unite without Shepard. Shepard only has life because Cerberus breathed life into him, and the second beast is the beast of Earth, so Cerberus and Earth. That's a pretty obvious thing there. He says the noise of the Reapers is like the trumpets announcing the beast that they make. Blah, blah, blah. Sovereign, he talks about in Mass Effect 1, Sovereign's line is reminiscent of God's line about the Alpha, the Omega. Sovereign says something like, we are the beginning, we are the end. I mean, literally says that we are the Alpha and the Omega, but without the fancier words. In Mass Effect 2, Sovereign's name of Nazara being coming from the word Nazarite, which means that is a servant of God. That is job to be a servant of God. And then the fact that the young boy in the white wool sweater, although I think it's a bit of a stretch in his behalf to say that's wool. We don't know what the hell that material is, but let's say it's wool. That's a common symbolism for God. Wool, a young boy, and wool, white wool, both being things that are often considered to be pure. Blah, blah, blah. And then he talks a lot about the Geth and about the Reaper's argument. So the main things that I found interesting there was all the talk about the similarities of Revelation, and I think he's onto something. Like, I 100% think is correct. You should definitely watch the video. It's fantastic. I'm going to link it in my video. It is phenomenal. Definitely worth a watch. However, I have issue with his portrayal of the Geth and then his portrayal of the choice you make in the ending. So the Star Child talks about the created will always rebel against their creator, and of course the big example of this in the Mass Effect series is the Geth. The Quarians built them, they gain intelligence, they rebel against the Quarians, almost kill them all but don't. And this is supposed to be the proof. In fact, the Star Child himself says this is the proof of what's going to happen. The created always want to be the creators. Man wants to be God. And he talks about how in the Garden of Eden, of course, after man eats of the fruit of knowledge, then God has to kick him out of the garden because he cannot allow them to eat of the fruit of eternal life. Because now that man has knowledge, if he also gains eternal life, man will be as God. And so the idea is that man wanted to be like God, man tried to be like God, and in vain the Geth want to be like the Quarians, and that's where the line, does this unit have a soul, or do these units have a soul? He points out how, when you look in Mass Effect 3, when you're playing through the part where it has the flashback, in the flashback the Geth says, do these units have a soul? And then when you get to Legion, if you go through the Legion death, Legion asks, does this unit have a soul? And the difference in these versus this, of course, being the individuality. But I have a large problem with that because he is pulling from Mass Effect 1 all the way through Mass Effect 3. Like, this was the guiding principle through the entire series. And we know that there's been a lot of fight amongst the different writers over what the ideas of the Mass Effect series was. And I forget the guy's name. I should have looked it up before I did this video. But the guy that was the lead writer for Legion, and a few other characters, of course, in Mass Effect 2, he discussed how the Geth were not supposed to be the, we are androids, we are robots, you are humans, you are weak, we will kill you kind of robot. And they also were not supposed to be the, we want to be humans so much, like Data kind of robot. And the idea was, the Geth were really interesting because they knew they were different, they understood that they were different, and they were okay with that. They didn't want to kill us because they were different. They didn't want to be like us, and they didn't wish they weren't different. They were okay with being different, and they were like, we want to coexist with you people. You guys do your things. You have your individuality. We do our things. We have our group consciousness and so forth, and that's okay. We don't need to be just like you to have diplomatic relationships and to be civil with each other. I think that was a really powerful statement. That's a rare thing for androids, robots, whatever you want to call them, AI in sci-fi universes. The majority of the time they really are either, I'm going to kill you, or, oh, I wish I was human, It's very rare for them to be different and be okay with that and just want to coexist. And while the argument is definitely there with Legion having the shepherd piece on him, and that's some individuality, and that is fine to an extent, having a little bit of individuality, having a little bit of self, does not necessarily mean that the Geth wanted them all to each be unique individual characters. Like, just because in a group environment, you know, in this type of environment, in this type of culture where the minds are literally linked as one, an individual unit might do something so that you can visually distinguish them from another one, doesn't mean that they no longer want to have the communal mind. Doesn't mean they no longer want to have the communal decision making. You know, you can have limited individualism, you know, limited individuality, but still keep the broader sense of what the Geth are. And in Mass Effect 2, Legion very specifically tells you, hey, the heretic Geth, and it's specifically, it's the heretics. The heretics want to be more like the Reapers and gain individuality. We don't want this. And I think that's ironic because he points out in his video how the term heretic is, of course, obviously a religious term, but his viewpoint is that the Reapers are as the god. And so if the Geth are calling the Reapers, if the Geth are calling the other Geth that want to be more like Reapers heretics, that terminology says that those Reapers are less god, or those Geth are less godlike, which is the opposite of what, you know, what the argument would entail. So I wasn't a big fan of that. I don't think that's correct. I think that the Geth didn't want to be like the creators at all. It was written fairly clearly in Mass Effect 2. I think it's one of the weakest parts of Mass Effect 3, when suddenly, with no explanation and for no reason whatsoever, the Geth are just like, hey guys, we all want to be individuals now. Haha, let's go do this Reaper code so we can all be individuals. Yay! We did the thing that we explicitly told you in the very last game we didn't want to do, but now we want to do it for no reason. Never was this explained. Never did we discuss our change of heart. I hate that part. I hated that part of Mass Effect 3 so much. And I believe the lead writer for Legion did say that, you know, he hated it as well. He felt it was destruction of his character. The other thing I have issue with is he talks about in the ending, he does admit himself that when the Star Child tells you all this stuff, that you have to take the Reaper's word for it. And he does also admit that Mass Effect is very optimistic about diplomacy, which really makes you not want to take the Reaper's word for it. And that, I think, is the basis of most really well thought out rational arguments to what's bad about the ending. Like, the stuff you just admitted, or he just admitted, is really what makes the ending so bad. The Reapers want you to believe them. They have never tried diplomacy with you in the past. They have never tried to talk to you in the past. In fact, I would argue that, again, since we're pretty confident, or at least I'm pretty confident, that Mass Effect did not have a unified vision since Mass Effect 1. And of course, Drew Capersian, or however you pronounce his last name, has said himself that the ending was supposed to be different originally. I don't even think that the idea that the the Reapers are angels is something that existed, although I do think he's right, and that by Mass Effect 3 that was the idea. I don't think that's something that existed since Mass Effect 1. And I believe that Sovereign's dialogue is much less Alpha Omega God and much more Lovecraftian villain in Mass Effect 1. That's, speaking of Lovecraft again, and, you know, cosmic horror, that was definitely the vibe I got from Mass Effect 1 when you first heard Sovereign talk. It was a very Lovecraftian, a very cosmic horror vibe. So the idea that the Reapers suddenly want to talk now that you are able to defeat them, now that you have what you've never had before, you have the technology to defeat them, suddenly, hold up guys, chill, we should talk, we should work this out. Why would you trust that? Why would you trust a group that the entire trilogy, like 120 hours worth of gameplay, have been, we're gonna murder you, we're gonna murder you, we're gonna murder you. We'll harvest you, but we're still gonna fucking murder you to harvest you. Like, fuck no, I'm not trusting them. Fuck those guys. Then the other thing about the optimism and diplomacy, I feel like you have every reason to neglect, or not neglect, but to refute what the Star Child says. And while they were, the creators, you know, the writers were like, oh, we understand that the people felt they weren't able to argue with the Star Child enough and decisions were taken out of their hand, so we added more dialogue in the extended cut. They didn't add the important dialogue. The important dialogue is the fact that you have refutable evidence against what the Star Child says if you had high enough ranking for your conversational stat, or whatever it was called. It's been so long since I played. The Star Child says in the extended cut very specifically that the Geth are proof that the Reapers are correct in what they're doing. But you united the Geth and the Quarian as long as you have the diplomatic points to do so. You are going and talking to the Star Child, and he's like, the Geth are proof. And Shepard never bothers to say, no, the Geth aren't proof. The Geth are proof that you're wrong, and that our way is right. You don't know what you're talking about. That we can fix this, that we can make this okay. And even if the endings didn't change, even if the BioWare writers are still like, it's our artistic integrity, whatever, blah, 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 these are the endings, period. If at least there was that sequence where Shepard fought the Star Child, I mean, not a physical fight, I mean a philosophical fight. There was no philosophical conflict in that conversation. The conversation was the Star Child telling you, this is the way it is. And Shepard's just like, well, let me ask you some leading questions to make sure this is the way it is. And the Star Child saying, yeah, bitch, this is the way it fucking is. And then you just have to go to the end and be like, I guess this is the way it fucking is. And if you don't agree with him, you never have the chance to prove it diplomatically, to talk it out. It's just, I don't agree with you, so I guess I'm picking destruction and killing the Reapers and killing all the fucking Geth and Eve, not Eve, what the fuck, Edie in the process also, which feels bad, man, you know what I mean? But I guess that's my only option because I don't agree with you, and we never had a chance to really flesh this out because it was just my way or the highway. This is the truth, and I'm just supposed to take the Reapers at face value. That's nonsense. Like, that's horrible. Again, they could have had the exact same ending, but if at least we had Shepard fighting with the Star Child, a philosophical debate, the type of conversations he has with all different races, with their leadership throughout all three fucking games, talking about this is not true. I have proved this isn't true. I have shown that this is not the only way. There is a third way. I would be fulfilled. I would have been happy because then at least we would have pointed out the obvious. And at the end of the day, the Star Child had all the power. He really did. Because if the Star Child said these are your only options, those are your only options. It's not like you could force the Star Child to a different option. So you can still have the same endings. Just give us the chance to refute and fight. No physical combat, that's fine. Give us another fight. And that leads to my last problem, is he discussed how you're in a scenario where you have to make the same decision the Geth had to make. When the Geth had the Quarians defeated, and they decided not to kill the Quarians because they could not handle that decision. And that's when he goes back into the discussion of Nietzsche and the idea of the death of God, and the importance of choice, of individuality for Nietzsche. And I have a serious problem with that as well, and my problem is that the two cannot actually be compared. What can be compared is the decision that Geth made with the Quarians and the decision that you make with the, what are the insectoid species? I keep wanting to say the Ranox, but that's not right. The Rachni, that you make with the Rachni. Because there is this concept that I learned about during Joe Torre's last season with the New York Yankees, called, there's no official name for it, it's just something that was discussed on ESPN. It's an idea of, can you afford your morals? How much can you afford your morals? And just a quick example of that is, well, two of them. One is Joe Torre. When Joe Torre finished his last season, the Yankee ownership was like, oh, you can come back again, but you're going to take a blah, blah, blah pay cut. Now, they're still offering him millions of dollars, but it's a slight. It's obviously a slight because Joe Torre hadn't made it to Super Bowl Sunday, guys, to the World Series in X amount of years. Joe Torre saw the slight, and he doesn't need millions of dollars because he already has millions of dollars. He could afford to take his moral high ground and say, no, I'm not going to take the spit in my face. I don't need the money that much. And a more down-to-earth in terms of monetary thing is with myself. Like, I don't like the condition that big farms put their animals in. So like, I would always buy cage-free eggs. cage-free eggs because, I mean, I don't care about hormonal injections and shit like that. I'm not fucking crazy, oh my god, organics, this and that, but I don't like the treatment of, you know, chickens being stuffed together and 100 of them in a line with zero space, like they're all chafing up against each other, just producing eggs constantly. So I prefer to buy cage-free eggs. And cage-free eggs are like $4 a dozen, and I buy 2 dozen pretty much every week for myself and my wife to eat for breakfast every day. Well, since the baby came and I only have one, you know, paycheck coming in now, I can no longer afford cage-free eggs. I mean, I probably could, but that's a lot of money for eggs. Instead, I now spend $3 and change, and I buy like 30-something eggs from Publix that I know the chickens are all cuddled together and shit, but that's what I can afford right now, so that's what I buy. I can no longer afford to follow those morals. It's too much money for me to do it. And that's the difference of where Shepard is at the end of the game versus where the Geth are with the Quarians. The Geth had won. The Geth were looking at the last of the Quarians. The Quarians were dead. The Geth could afford to say, we don't have to kill them all. Let's step away. This is too big a decision to make right now. Because there's going to be one of two things, right? It's going to be either the Quarians are not able to kill them or decide they don't want to kill them, and the Geth did not commit, you know, complete genocide of an entire race when they didn't have to. Or two, the Quarians build themselves back up, decide, oh, it's fucking round 2 against the Geth now, bitches, we're going to wipe you out. But even in that scenario, the Geth had already won. They had time to prepare for that. If that happened, they would have been able to say, okay, we can formulate a response. They were not in a life or death situation right then and there. They could afford to follow their morals and say, wiping out an entire species off the face of the galaxy is not something we believe in. And that's the same situation you are with Arachni. You know, if you have Rex with you, of course, being Krogan, and their history with Arachni, Rex is like, fucking do it, they're going to come back, they're going to kill everybody. But you could afford to tell him, no, Rex, chill the fuck out. Because right now there's one queen. She can't do shit right now. If they, you know, she had a bunch of eggs and they rebuilt and they came out to the galaxy, that would be later. You had time to figure that out and to deal with that when it happened. The Reapers, you were not beating the Reapers. I don't give a fuck if you had every single, what is, galaxy points, whatever the hell they were called, and united every goddamn race, and everything was perfect, and you had all the tech and all the superhero characters and blah blah blah. You were not defeating the Reapers conventionally. It's been said over and over. You cannot defeat them conventionally. We cannot defeat them conventionally. Blah blah blah. We cannot defeat them conventionally. You can't. You don't have the freedom. You don't have the currency to say, oh, you know what, Starchild? Maybe you're right. I really don't want to commit mass genocide against the Reapers. Let's not wipe this species off the face of the galaxy. Because if you don't do something to stop them, they are going to kill you right now. Every human, every single human, every single Turian, every single Solarian, Quarian, Krogan, Geth, every single one of them, the fucking jellyfish people, the Elcor, every single intelligent species that is capable of FTL travel is dead. Every member of every species, dead that day, that night, if Shepard does not make a call. Shepard cannot afford to say, no, I will wait. He cannot afford to say, this is too big a decision to make to stop the Reapers. You have to stop them. You have to make a decision. You do not have the currency not to. And that is a big difference between what happened with them and the Geth, and that, along with the issue of the lack of conversation, and along with the issue of the Geth just being ruined and used to prove a point that they disproved themselves in Mass Effect 2, is why I feel that despite SolePorpoise's video making me think more fondly of Mass Effect 3's ending, that it is still a failure of an ending, and still leads me to believe that Mass Effect 3 is narratively, gameplay-wise is phenomenal, but narratively the weakest of the trilogy. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, it really was more meant for this one individual than for everyone and all, but watch this video first, then listen to my thoughts. It's a really good video. See you guys next time. Peace.